Royal Guard shut down a mysterious late-night shipment, yet they had no idea they were stepping into the royal family's most explosive secret. Moments later, whispers raced through the palace halls. Lady Camilla's sealed crates weren't just private items. They allegedly carried jewels straight from the late Queen's hidden vault. As suspicion rose and the guards demanded answers, the truth threatened to shake the crown itself, because what they uncovered wasn't just royal property. It was royal betrayal waiting to be exposed. The courtyard was silent now, yet the memory of the day's rituals lingered like smoke over the stone. Earlier, servants had scurried along marble floors, lanterns swaying, their footsteps echoing through the palace corridors. Now only the whisper of the wind pressed against the outer gates, carrying with it a faint chill that seeped through the cracks of history. The walls, carved with centuries of royal legacy, seemed heavier in the darkness, bearing witness to every secret, every whispered fear. Somewhere beyond the velvet drapes of the inner chambers, the night was stirring. A quiet disturbance, subtle but impossible to ignore. The camera drifts through a narrow corridor, glancing over the polished stone, where shadows stretch like fingers along the walls. The royal guard moves with practiced precision, boots silent yet deliberate. At the forefront, Captain Alistair stands rigid, his posture a statement of duty forged over decades. His eyes, dark and unyielding, scan the hallway, lingering on the faint glimmer of a crate that rests near Camilla's private chambers. The metallic clink from within is faint, almost hesitant, yet unmistakable. Every soldier in the formation feels the weight of that sound, not merely as evidence of theft, but as a fracture in the moral fabric they swore to protect. Alistair steps closer, hands brushing the velvet that conceals the contents. The torchlight flickers across his face, highlighting the lines etched by years of service. The camera closes in on his hand as it slowly lifts the covering. Beneath, a cascade of rubies and diamonds shimmers, catching the firelight in a display of audacious defiance. These jewels are not simply valuable, they are history incarnate, each stone a heartbeat of the crown, each gem a testament to legacy and lineage. The air thickens, charged with a tension born not of fear, but of moral reckoning. From the shadows, Camilla emerges, her figure half-gone, sealed by a pillar. Her expression is unreadable, calm yet taut with underlying defiance. She moves with calculated grace, her presence a silent challenge. The aide trailing behind, papers trembling in his hand, glances nervously at the captain. No one dares speak. Here, in the sanctum of the palace's secrets, words are weighty, capable of igniting confrontation. Loyalty, tradition, and law are all under scrutiny, balanced precariously on the edge of conscience. Alistair's voice cuts through the tension, low and deliberate. Camilla, these jewels, they belong to the Queen, not you. The words are both declaration and summons, echoing against stone walls with an authority that brooks no argument. Camilla's lips curve slightly, a smile too measured to be innocent. I am only safeguarding what history seems to have forgotten. She murmurs, her tone deliberate, almost casual, yet it vibrates with underlying menace. The camera pans to the crates once more, the gemstones reflecting fractured light like a shattered mirror of the palace's trust. Every movement, every glance becomes a dialogue of its own. Alistair's mind races, cataloguing not just the theft but the moral and ethical implications. When does loyalty become complicity? When does obedience blind us to wrongdoing? His thoughts are not spoken, but their gravity fills the corridor, pressing on every observer, including the nervous aides and the quiet soldiers whose hands hover near sheathed swords. The very air seems to hold its breath, waiting for the first ripple of action. Earlier in the evening, nothing had suggested such a breach. Vaults had been double, locked, logs meticulously maintained, guards rotated at intervals designed to prevent any lapse. yet subtlety had triumphed over protocol. Camilla, with her intimate knowledge of palace routines, had navigated every safeguard, leaving a trail almost invisible, if not for the vigilance of the royal guard. And now before them lay proof not just of theft, but of audacious planning, a test of moral integrity that would ripple through the palace walls. The camera shifts to the young aide, whose resolve finally falters. He drops the papers he had clutched, a sharp rustle breaking the oppressive silence. A single page flutters, landing atop the crate, partially obscured. Its markings, numbers, letters, encrypted annotations, seem innocuous at first glance, but to Alistair, they pulse with significance. A ledger, secreted within the shipment, hints at a conspiracy far larger than the jewels themselves. The theft is merely the opening act. The true narrative lies within these faintly scrawled symbols. Camilla steps back, shadow stretching along the marble floor, a visual embodiment of the palace's hidden rot. "You think these stones are mere ornaments," she says softly, almost conversationally. "They are memory, power, and consequence. You understand nothing of the history they carry." Her words, though quiet, cut through the room with the weight of moral provocation. Alistair remains still, jaw clenched, grappling with the immediacy of law versus the invisible pressures of legacy and tradition. The soundscape amplifies the tension, the faint scrape of boots against marble, the subtle rustle of fabric, and the soft clink of chains securing the crates. The camera lingers on a single ruby, catching the torchlight and refracting it into deep crimson shards across the floor. Each shard is a fragment of memory, of unspoken promises, of oaths broken in silence. Alistair bends slightly, inspecting the stones, mentally recording their arrangement, understanding that restoring them to the vault will not repair the rupture in trust now etched into the palace's consciousness. Camilla's presence remains commanding, yet a subtle tremor betrays her inner unease. Pride and fear dance beneath her composed exterior, a tension mirrored in the captain's eyes. Finally, he straightens, voice firm yet measured, carrying both the authority of command and the burden of conscience. "These jewels will return to the vault immediately, no exceptions." His gaze locks on hers, and in the brief silence, an unspoken understanding passes between them. This is not merely a question of law, but of morality, legacy, and trust. The guards begin the meticulous process of resecuring the crates. Each motion is deliberate, almost ceremonial, as though performing a ritual to mend the fractured balance of duty and integrity. The camera pans upward, capturing the corridor from above, polished floors, torchlight reflecting off the ornate carvings, and the subtle haze of tension still lingering in the air. In corners, aides remain silent observers. Caught between fear and conscience, unable to act yet unwilling to look away, Alistair's eyes drift again to the scattered page from the ledger. Its presence is almost symbolic, a quiet narrative thread leading toward revelations that promise to unravel hidden truths, whispers of hidden alliances. Debts and secret promises ripple through the palace like an unseen current. The moral weight presses heavier than any jewel, a burden that demands action, discernment, and vigilance. The camera slowly retreats, leaving the room dimly lit, the jewels once more encased in velvet. Camilla fades into the corridor's darkness, her figure lingering like a shadow memory. Silence returns, yet it carries the unspoken weight of anticipation, the hint of secrets waiting to surface. Among the scattered papers, the ledger lies partially exposed, a coded clue to a conspiracy reaching far beyond the theft. The night is far from over, and the royal guard is only beginning to grasp the scope of the palace's hidden shadows. The corridor remained hushed, yet the air vibrated with an unspoken accusation. The torches flickered as if hesitant to illuminate the unfolding drama. Captain Alistair's gaze never wavered from the scattered page, the ledger tucked beneath the velvet like a whisper of truth, fragile yet impossible to ignore. Camilla's silhouette lingered in the shadows, distant but omnipresent, a silent challenge woven into the very fabric of the night. The palace, ancient and monumental, seemed to exhale around them, aware of the fracture in its history, in its chain of command, in its moral code. Alistair motioned to his guards with a precise hand, signalling a slow, methodical retrieval of the crates. Every step of the operation was deliberate. Any misstep could trigger confrontation, not only with Camilla, but with the weight of the palace's ceremonial hierarchy. The soldiers moved like shadows themselves, careful not to disturb the delicate balance between authority and defiance. A faint metallic clink echoed, each note resonating through the corridor like a judge's gavel, each one a reminder that loyalty had limits and duty could demand sacrifice. Camilla finally stepped forward, the faint rustle of her gown blending with the soft echo of boots. Her voice was controlled, measured, almost melodic, yet it carried a warning beneath the calm. Do you truly believe obedience is the measure of loyalty? Or have you forgotten that sometimes history demands its own custodians? The words were not merely spoken. They were carved into the silence, settling uneasily over each listener. Alistair's jaw tightened. Custodians of history, or thieves of trust? The question pressed at the edge of his conscience, a moral fulcrum he could neither ignore nor resolve. The camera cut close on the ledger, its pages covered in faint symbols, ciphers and shorthand notes that hinted at a clandestine network operating beyond the guard's immediate perception. Alistair crouched, running a gloved hand over the paper, tracing the lines as if they were veins, pulsing with life. Each annotation suggested collaboration, alliances hidden beneath layers of ceremony and etiquette, linking private chambers, royal aides, and perhaps even distant political actors. The theft of jewels was only the first gesture in a pattern of deception that threatened to undermine the very foundation of the palace. A young aide, pale and trembling, finally found his voice. "Captain, there are more pages, hidden, encrypted. I only discovered them after the crates were moved." His words trembled like the candle flames that danced along the corridor walls. Alistair's eyes flickered with both gratitude and unease. He knew, instinctively, that these additional pages could expose not only the path of the stolen jewels, but the deeper motives behind the act. Every detail mattered, each cipher a potential revelation, every annotation a link in a chain of hidden allegiances. Camilla's eyes gleamed in the low light, reflecting not fear but calculation. "You may believe you hold the truth in your hands," she said softly, almost a whisper. "But truth is not always as it seems. You will learn that loyalty is never a straight path." The room seemed to contract around her words, the air heavy with anticipation. Even the walls, carved from centuries, old stone, seemed to close in, emphasizing the moral pressure mounting within the chamber. Alistair motioned for silence, signaling his guards to maintain formation. He knelt again over the ledger, careful not to tear its fragile pages. His mind raced, decoding symbols, assessing potential threats, and weighing the consequences of immediate action. One misjudgment could compromise the investigation, endanger the vault, or inflame the already fragile trust within the palace hierarchy. Yet the moral imperative was clear. Concealment was not an option. The crown's legacy demanded both vigilance and discernment. The jewels, now partially re-ensconced in velvet, caught the torchlight, scattering patterns of red, blue, and gold across the floor. Each gem reflected centuries of history, a silent testimony to both human ambition and institutional continuity. Alistair's gaze shifted from the stones to Camilla, reading her expressions with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Pride, fear, and a faint trace of defiance interwove in her posture, a living map of the palace's fractured ethics. The tension was almost tangible, a delicate lattice of power, trust, and moral responsibility. Hours seemed to pass in these tense moments, the only sounds the soft scrape of guards' boots and the occasional flutter of the ledger's fragile pages. Alistair rose slowly, eyes never leaving Camilla. "You must understand," he said, voice steady, "that this is not simply about jewels. Every action carries weight. Every choice defines loyalty. And right now, the path you've chosen threatens to fracture both." Camilla tilted her head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "And yet, Captain," she said softly, voice laced with intrigue, "sometimes the crown itself is blind to the choices that must be made to preserve it. Are you certain you know which side is right?" Her question, rhetorical yet pointed, reverberated through the chamber, forcing each guard to examine their own convictions, their own understanding of duty, and the moral consequences of obedience. Alistair's hand hovered over the ledger once more, fingers tracing a series of faint ciphers. Each symbol represented more than data. It was a map of intent, a record of secrets that could destabilize the palace if misinterpreted or ignored. He knew that deciphering these notes would require meticulous patience, strategic foresight, and an unwavering commitment to principle. One false move could unleash consequences far beyond the theft, touching not only the immediate household, but the hidden alliances and obligations woven into the very foundation of power. The camera pulls back to show the entire scene. The guards poised like statues of discipline, Camilla half hidden in shadow, and the young aides trembling at the periphery. The vault, unseen yet omnipresent in memory, seems to hum with quiet authority. Every heartbeat in the corridor carries the weight of history, every whisper a potential confession, every movement a moral test. The jewels glint, silent witnesses, ambition, secrecy, and human frailty. As Alistair begins cataloguing the contents, a subtle, almost imperceptible detail catches his eye. A corner of the ledger marked differently, almost ceremoniously, hinting at contacts outside the palace, distant arrangements that stretch beyond immediate comprehension. His breath catches slightly. He senses that the theft is not isolated, but part of a web reaching further than anyone suspected. This realization amplifies the tension, transforming the moral question from one of obedience versus disobedience into a labyrinthine test of judgment. Foresight and ethical courage. Camilla finally retreats, her steps quiet but deliberate, fading into the shadows. The tension lingers after her departure, heavier than before, as if her presence had left an invisible mark on the walls themselves. The guards remain alert, aware that the night has only begun, and that the palace's hidden currents are far from fully revealed. Alistair turns to the aides, voice firm yet tempered with restraint. "Gather all records. Every note, every paper, every mark must be secured. Nothing is too small. The ledger will guide us, but we must be vigilant, always vigilant." The camera drifts toward the ceiling, capturing the flickering torchlight against the carved vault doors. The shadows stretch like fingers, tracing the history of secrecy embedded in the palace's architecture. The jewels glimmer faintly in their velvet coverings, silent sentinels awaiting return, while the ledger, small, fragile, and enigmatic, remains the key to understanding the depth of the night's transgressions. The air is thick with anticipation, a slow, burning tension that promises the unraveling of secrets, conspiracies, and the moral reckoning to come. Among the jewels, the ledger, and whispered shadows, a subtle clue emerged, a coded hint of collusion, a thread linking past thefts to an unseen hand. The royal guard now stood at the threshold of a larger mystery, one that would test loyalty, law, and conscience beyond the immediate theft, beckoning them towards secrets encased in gold, silence, and shadows yet untold. The morning sun had yet to fully pierce the palace's stone facades when Captain Alistair convened his small team in the inner vault chamber. Silence dominated the room, thick and palpable, broken only by the soft shuffle of papers and the muted Clink of tools against stone. The crates containing the late Queen's jewels rested atop a heavy oak table, carefully unwrapped and arranged with almost ritualistic precision. Dust motes danced in the early light, shimmering over rubies and diamonds as though the palace itself were watching, reminding all present that history carried weight far beyond the material. Alistair's eyes scanned the meticulously catalogued inventory once more. Every gem, every setting, was a testament to centuries of royal legacy, each jewel a silent witness to ceremonies, coronations, and quiet acts of devotion, yet now, tainted by theft, they bore a different burden, a moral responsibility pressing on the captain and his guards. He turned to his aides, voice deliberate, carrying the authority of decades of training and service. We trace provenance first. Each stone must be accounted for, including who had access and how this breach occurred. His words, though calm, carried an unmistakable urgency. This was not a procedural exercise, it was a moral excavation, a reckoning of trust and betrayal. The camera pans across the vault, revealing high ceilings carved with gilded motifs, rows of steel, bound cabinets, and heavy archival ledgers neatly stacked along the walls. A faint hum of the palace beyond drifts in the distant footfalls of servants unaware of the night's upheaval, the echo of doors closing and whispers fading into the hallways. Every sound reminds the guards that, though the immediate threat had been intercepted, the ripple of consequences had only just begun. Alistair opens the first ledger, its pages fragile, the ink faded but legible. Each entry is painstaking, names, dates, vault rotations, and detailed records of who had handled the jewels over decades. He traces his finger along the entries, aligning them against the intercepted shipment. The discrepancies are subtle. A shifted date here, a misaligned signature there, but they are enough to suggest deliberate concealment. His inner voice narrates in quiet tension. The system is sound, yet human greed finds its cracks. History is preserved not just in stone and paper, but in vigilance. A junior aide, nervous and hesitant, steps forward with a small tablet containing notes he had compiled overnight. Captain, there are records of recent vault inspections. Some discrepancies are unexplained. He hands the tablet to Alistair, who reviews the entries, brow furrowed. The camera shifts to close-ups, lines of text, annotations in the margins, faint smudges of ink that suggest hurried documentation or subtle manipulation. Alistair's mind races, connecting patterns, reconstructing timelines, with the precision of a strategist and the caution of a historian. Historical context floods into the scene as Alistair contemplates the jewels themselves. Each piece was more than an ornament. The late Queen's sapphire brooch, worn at state banquets, the ruby, encrusted diadem gifted to foreign dignitaries, the diamond-studded necklace, a legacy of alliances carefully forged over generations. They were symbols of power, diplomacy, and trust, now tainted by human ambition. The camera lingers over the diadem, catching its facets in golden light, every reflection a reminder of the fragility of duty and the permanence of history. Alistair calls the aides forward, one by one, his voice measured but probing. Explain these anomalies. Who had access? Who signed off last? The aides shift nervously, aware that every hesitation, every misstatement, might hint at collusion. One, a middle-aged man named Harrington, clears his throat. Captain, all protocols were followed. At least, as far as I know. His eyes flicker briefly toward a locked cabinet, a subtle movement that does not escape Alistair. There is more here than meets the eye, the captain realizes, each subtle glance and twitch amplifying the tension of the room. The camera moves slowly around the aides' faces, capturing micro-expressions, the faint quiver of fear, a tightened jaw, a hesitant swallow. Every detail is a narrative of its own, exposing the psychological weight of secrecy. Alistair takes a slow breath, allowing the silence to stretch, letting the aides feel the moral pressure settle like a stone in their chests. Here, Investigation is as much about reading people as reading ledgers, as much about intuition as documentation. Hours pass as the team painstakingly cross-references vault logs with the ledger found in the stolen shipment. Each discrepancy uncovered hints at an internal networks, more subtle yet deliberate. A clerk's forged signature here, a misfiled report there. Patterns emerge, suggesting collusion among palace aides and perhaps even private staff close to Camilla's quarters. The tension builds not with loud confrontation, but with the slow, methodical uncovering of human frailty hidden beneath layers of etiquette and protocol. Alistair pauses, holding a small velvet pouch containing a handful of loose diamonds. His gloved fingers tremble slightly, a rare breach in composure. Each gem carries history, he murmurs, more to himself than anyone else. Each represents a choice someone made. Some chose loyalty, others chose ambition. The room is silent except for the soft scrape of a ledger closing and the metallic clink of the pouch being set aside. Even in quiet, the moral gravity is palpable. A minor breakthrough occurs when a faint watermark on the ledger paper is identified, a subtle insignia linking it to an obscure, long, disbanded palace office. Alistair leans closer, tracing the emblem with his gloved fingertip. This isn't random, he murmurs. It's deliberate. Someone revived a forgotten channel to facilitate this theft. The camera cuts to close-ups of aides exchanging nervous glances, aware that this revelation extends the scope of the crime beyond immediate quarters. The room grows heavier, each second stretching with the weight of potential betrayal. As the investigation unfolds, Alistair reflects silently on the moral dimension, the tension between duty to the crown and duty to truth, between protocol and conscience. These jewels were never merely decoration. They were reminders of responsibility, of accountability, of continuity, and yet they have become instruments of deception. His eyes sweep the room, registering every hesitation, every flicker of guilt or pride. He realizes that the theft, while material, is fundamentally a crisis of ethics, a mirror reflecting human ambition in the quietest corners of the palace. The camera lingers on a single ruby, now separated from its setting. It lies on a ledger page, reflecting faint light, almost as if the jewel itself is observing the investigation. Alistair bends over it, considering the weight of history and the stakes of the current inquiry. Each annotation in the ledger, each subtle discrepancy, becomes a clue not only to a crime, but to the moral landscape of those who serve the crown. A subtle emotional pivot occurs when the junior aide, trembling, whispers about an unusual correspondence found tucked among the vault records. "Captain, there's a note addressed to Camilla from someone unidentified." Alistair's gaze sharpens. The camera shifts to a close-up of his eyes, narrowing with the realization that internal collusion is more probable than he had imagined. The moral stakes intensify. Loyalty, legality, and personal ethics now collide in ways that cannot be ignored. The room grows quieter as Alistair opens the correspondence carefully. The note is brief, coded, yet unmistakably conspiratorial. A subtle warning of oversight, an instruction to proceed carefully, a promise of reward. The camera captures the shadows playing across the walls, twisting and elongating like the reach of human ambition, extending into spaces both literal and metaphorical. The guards and aides remain motionless, aware that the discovery has shifted the investigation from a procedural inquiry to a confrontation with hidden motives. Alistair straightens, his voice low and steady. "This correspondence, it is forbidden, and yet it confirms what the ledger suggests. Someone within this palace is acting beyond loyalty, beyond law." He lets the words settle. The room feels heavier, as though the stone walls themselves acknowledge the gravity of the breach. The camera pans over the aides' faces, some pale, some tense, all now caught in the slow revelation of human ambition intertwined with institutional duty. The fine minutes of the morning are spent cataloguing the note and cross, referencing it against the ledger. Each symbol, each subtle mark, reinforces the emerging picture. A network of secrecy, deliberate and patient, operating quietly within the palace's inner circles. Alistair's hand rests lightly on ledger, the weight of responsibility almost tangible. This is more than a theft. It is an ethical and historical puzzle that demands precision, courage, and unflinching attention to detail. The camera slowly retreats, capturing the room in wide perspective, the guards standing alert. Velvet, covered jewels gleaming faintly in the soft light, the ledger lying open with ciphers visible, and the aides frozen in silent contemplation of their roles in a system suddenly revealed to be vulnerable. The moral and procedural stakes have been defined. The investigation is far from complete, and the shadows of ambition and secrecy stretch longer than any torchlight can reach. Among the ledgers, correspondence, and whispered secrets, a pattern began to emerge, a trace of internal collusion and subtle deceit. Alistair knew that uncovering the full extent of human ambition within these walls would require patience, insight, and a confrontation with the very nature of loyalty itself. The next discovery promised to shift the investigation from protocol to revelation, hinting at consequences that could fracture not just trust, but the palace itself. The vault remained quiet. Yet the air was heavy with anticipation. Light from the high windows slanted across the marble floors, reflecting faint glimmers off the jewels still encased in black velvet. Each gemstone seemed to hold a memory of ceremonies past, state dinners, coronations, private oaths of service, and now they bore the shadow of human ambition. Captain Alistair stood at the center of the chamber, ledger in hand, eyes scanning each page with the precision of a strategist and the caution of a historian. He could almost feel the weight of centuries pressing down, reminding him that this was more than theft. It was a breach of trust that demanded methodical, deliberate action. A soft rustle caught his attention. One of the aides, hands shaking slightly, approached with a folded piece of parchment. Another fragment of correspondence discovered in the vault archives. The note, addressed to Camilla, but unsigned, contained brief instructions and cryptic references to timing, storage, and oversight. Captain, the aide whispered, voice barely audible over the hush. This was hidden among the Queen's old archival logs. It appears deliberate, calculated. Alistair nodded, recognizing the significance immediately. The theft was not spontaneous. It had been orchestrated, perhaps with the participation, or at least the tacit approval, of insiders. The camera shifts close on the parchment, highlighting the elegant, almost imperceptible script. Every curve of the letters, every faint smudge, speaks of secrecy, of haste, and of careful concealment. Alistair's mind moves rapidly, tracing potential connections, aides who had access, previous inspections with minor irregularities, the timing of shifts in Camilla's private quarters. The ledger and the correspondence together form a subtle web, faint threads connecting people, places, and motives. One wrong interpretation could misdirect the investigation. One overlooked detail could allow complicity to persist unchecked. Alistair gestures for the aides to gather around. His voice, calm but firm, cuts through the chamber. We must reconstruct the timeline precisely. Every movement, every access point, every signature must be accounted for. There are no minor details in this investigation. He turns to a mid-level clerk who hesitates under the weight of the captain's gaze. Start with the vault logs. Alistair instructs, and cross. Reference with the ledger. Anything unusual, no matter how small, must be flagged. The camera follows the aides as they move deliberately across the room, opening cabinets, spreading documents across polished tables, and tracing lines of information. Each motion is slow, meticulous, almost ceremonial. Dust floats in the sunlight like tiny specters, carrying the echoes of past Mistakes and unspoken secrets. Alistair's eyes never leave the ledger, scanning, comparing, cataloguing. Each entry reveals subtle inconsistencies, a shifted date, a signature that doesn't match known handwriting, a ledger notation out of sequence. Together, they form a pattern hinting at deliberate misdirection. The historical significance of the jewels becomes clear as Alistair examines the pieces individually. The sapphire brooch once worn at state dinners now seems to glint with quiet accusation. The ruby diadem, a symbol of diplomatic alliances, now reflects the strain of internal deception. These objects are more than ornaments. They are markers of power, memory, and continuity. And yet, in the context of the theft, they carry an additional burden, proof of human ambition pressing against centuries of protocol. Hours pass with slow, deliberate tension. The camera cuts Alistair's face, etched with concentration, eyes narrowing as he deciphers a series of subtle ledger entries. Notes indicating last-minute inspections, seemingly irrelevant signatures, and minor discrepancies suggest that someone had exploited the palace's reliance on routine. The theft, he realizes, was only the surface manifestation of a deeper network of complicity, one that might reach into areas long thought secure. A breakthrough comes when a subtle watermark is identified on one of the ledger pages, a faint emblem of a disbanded office within the palace archives. The emblem linked the ledger to administrative channels long considered obsolete. Alistair leans closer, tracing the emblem with a gloved finger. The realization hits. Someone has deliberately revived a forgotten procedural pathway to facilitate the theft. The camera pans slowly over the aids, capturing the micro expressions of unease, tightened lips, averted eyes, and subtle tremors of conscience. The discovery prompts Alistair to interrogate the aides more formally. Each is questioned under the strict protocols of etiquette, their answers measured but revealing. One aide, Harrington, offers careful statements, but a nervous glance toward Camilla's former office betrays more than his words admit. Another slips when recounting the vault rotations, a hesitation that Alistair notes silently. The captain's inner voice underscores the tension. Loyalty is tested not just by command, but by the choices made in shadows. The ledger reveals the first faint hints of human greed intertwined with political maneuvering. Certain jewels had been pledged, their movement documented subtly to avoid detection, suggesting debts or promises extending back decades. The moral implications are heavy. Theft is no longer a simple crime of material gain. It is a manifestation of ambition, secrecy, and perhaps a calculated assertion of power. Alistair realizes the complexity of the palace's moral landscape. Tradition, bloodline, and law intersect here, and each may conflict with the other. A subtle tension builds as a minor breach in protocol emerges, correspondence between Camilla and an unknown accomplice. The camera focuses on the folded note, partially concealed in a ledger entry. Alistair examines it carefully, recognizing the significance. Its content, though encrypted, suggests coordination, warning, and anticipation. Proof that the theft was neither isolated nor impulsive. The realization hits the room like a weight. Someone within the palace has acted in deliberate secrecy, challenging both protocol and loyalty. Alistair pauses to consider the moral dilemma before him. Tradition demands respect for hierarchy, bloodline demands deference, yet the law, and conscience demands investigation. The camera drifts slowly around the vault, capturing the juxtaposition of meticulous order and subtle chaos. Treasures glimmering, ledgers open, aids frozen in the wait of expectation. Every artifact, every document, every glance becomes a silent participant in this unfolding drama. Finally, Alistair gathers the aides together. These findings are not just anomalies, he states firmly. They are proof of coordination, of internal collusion. We must proceed carefully, yet decisively. Our duty is to uncover the truth, to protect the crown and its legacy, and to ensure that human ambition does not corrupt what is sacred. His eyes move toward the partially exposed ledger, its cryptic entries beckoning further investigation. The camera lingers on his face, the faint tension in his jaw, the silent determination in his eyes. A man confronting not just theft, but the moral fabric of an institution. The jewels, now partially returned to secure storage, glint faintly in the vault's filtered sunlight, silent witnesses to the unfolding investigation. Each reflection seems to echo the tension in the room, reinforcing the stakes. Betrayal is subtle, human ambition persistent, and the consequences of oversight far-reaching. The moral weight of history, law, and loyalty presses on Alistair and his team, demanding attention, courage, and unwavering focus. As the ledger and correspondence reveal their first secrets, the outline of a deeper conspiracy begins to emerge. Threads of ambition, loyalty, and greed intertwining within the palace. Alistair senses that confronting Camilla directly will soon be inevitable, and that when it happens, the moral stakes will rise beyond protocol, into the very heart of trust, inheritance, and authority. The corridor outside Camilla's private chambers was silent, yet every step of Captain Alistair's boots resonated like a drumbeat of inevitability. The jewels and the ledger had revealed only fragments of the truth. Now confrontation awaited. Shadows stretched along the marble walls, the torchlight flickering as if uncertain whether to illuminate or conceal. Inside, the palace seemed to hold its breath, aware that the next moments would shift the balance of loyalty, law, and legacy. Alistair paused before the door, gloved hands resting lightly on the ornate brass handle. He inhaled slowly, centering himself. Protocol demands respect. Conscience demands action. For decades he had served the crown, disciplined and unwavering. Yet tonight, the line between obedience and justice blurred, tested by human ambition and secrecy. He pressed a finger against the door, the soft click of the lock echoing like a harbinger. The chamber beyond was quiet. The air thrummed with anticipation. Camilla waited, seated in a high-backed chair, her posture impeccably composed. Her expression was serene, almost detached, but her eyes betrayed a sharp, calculating awareness. The room itself was a reflection of her temperament. Soft candlelight flickered across. Velvet drapes, gilded furniture gleamed faintly, and personal effects hinted at both wealth and deliberate curation. The camera pans slowly across the chamber, lingering on a ruby pendant glinting from a side table, a mirror to the broader theft that had brought them here. Alistair entered, the subtle echo of his boots on polished floors a counterpoint to the silence. "Camilla," he began, voice measured yet firm, "we need to discuss the jewels and the ledger. Both indicate actions that cannot be ignored." Her eyes lifted, meeting his with steady defiance. The camera lingers on the tension in her jaw, the faint raise of her eyebrows, small gestures, yet laden with intent. She inclined her head slightly, voice calm but deliberate. "Captain, you are aware, I assume, that appearances can be misleading. These jewels, these ledgers, they do not tell the full story." Her words hang in the air, charged with both challenge and insinuation. Alistair felt the weight of the palace pressing against him, the moral duty to uncover the truth, the ceremonial expectation to respect hierarchy, and the ethical imperative to prevent further compromise. The first round of dialogue unfolds almost rhythmically, alternating between spoken words and silent tension. Camilla shifts slightly, the subtle rustle of her gown a counterpoint to Alistair's measured breathing. "I understand protocol," she continues, "but loyalty. Loyalty is more than obedience. You would do well to remember that." Her gaze pierces him, not with accusation, but with the quiet certainty of someone who believes herself untouchable. Alistair's response is deliberate, each word weighted. Loyalty cannot be measured by self-interest, Camilla. The crown entrusted us with these jewels, with history itself. Misuse of that trust is betrayal. His eyes sweep the chamber, noting every minute detail, the placement of papers, the slight displacement of ornaments, the faint glow of candlelight reflecting off polished surfaces. Each element reinforces the moral and procedural stakes. The tension rises as subtle revelations emerge. Alistair produces the ledger, placing it carefully on the table between them. Pages are opened to the coded entries and the correspondence uncovered by the aides. Camilla leans forward slightly, tracing one symbol with a fingertip. You see conspiracy where there is only history in motion. She says softly, almost wistfully, sometimes a pledge, sometimes a promise. It is not theft but necessity. You judge too quickly. Alistair's jaw tightens. The camera closes in on his hand, hovering over the ledger, almost touching but restrained, a reflection of his internal struggle. Necessity or ambition? He asks himself. The question is not rhetorical. The evidence is undeniable, yet interpretation is a delicate art. Human motives are seldom pure. Ambition and self-interest often hide behind the veil of duty. A pause stretches between them, heavy with unspoken calculation. The chamber seems to contract, the flickering candlelight casting shadows that twist like the palace's own secrets. Alistair studies her carefully, the poised elegance, the subtle tremor in her hands, the flicker of hesitation behind composed eyes. Camilla remains outwardly calm, but even the smallest gesture, the twitch of a finger, a blink, a breath held a moment too long, betrays the internal conflict she cannot fully mask. Captain's next words are deliberate, measured for moral weight. Some of the jewels were pledged decades ago. Settled debts, perhaps, yes, but not documented properly. That is not tradition. That is concealment. He gestures to the ledger, letting it speak as much as his voice. Camilla's eyes flicker, a faint acknowledgement of truth that she refuses to admit aloud. The camera cuts to the ruby-studded diadem on a side table, reflecting the subtle tension like a silent witness. The emotional midpoint comes when Camilla speaks quietly, almost a confession. I protect what I believe is rightfully mine. Perhaps the crown does not see the value in history the way I do. Perhaps, Captain, perhaps you do not either. Her words carry both defensiveness and vulnerability. The camera lingers on her expression, pride tempered with fear, arrogance shadowed by uncertainty. Alistair registers the nuance, but does not respond immediately. Every word, every gesture, every pause is now part of the unfolding moral landscape. Alistair leans forward, voice steady yet insistent. This is not about ownership, Camilla. It is about trust. History belongs to the crown, to the people, and to the continuity of tradition. We cannot allow personal ambition to override that responsibility. His gaze meets hers unwavering, though internally he weighs the consequences, confrontation, compliance, or compromise. The room is heavy with the tension of unspoken possibilities. The camera drifts slowly over the chamber, capturing micro-details, a ledger corner folded, a pen misplaced, faint shadow of a curtain dancing across the floor. Each element reinforces the narrative of moral tension, of hidden agendas, of history and ambition colliding. Outside, the faint sound of a distant bell marks the passing of hours, echoing through the corridors, a reminder that time itself is a silent observer of human frailty. A subtle, quiet pivot occurs when Alistair presents a minor revelation. A few entries in the ledger correspond to unrecorded movements of jewels. Camilla leans back, masking surprise with calm, but the camera captures a slight narrowing of her eyes. The room holds its breath. The first tangible evidence of collusion is visible. Her voice, soft but precise, breaks the silence. You are suggesting. I acted alone. Alistair responds firmly, carefully balancing authority and moral clarity. I am suggesting you acted knowingly, whether alone or with others. Intent matters, actions matter. Loyalty cannot be selective, Camilla. The ledger rests between them like a bridge and a barrier, silent yet decisive. The tension grows, both cinematic and moral, as the stakes of the confrontation extend beyond jewels to the very foundations of trust, hierarchy, and duty. The first act of confrontation concludes with a quiet, unresolved pause. Camilla's lips tighten, her eyes thoughtful yet unrepentant. Alistair rises slowly, cataloguing every subtle gesture, aware that each interaction is a piece of a larger puzzle. The camera pulls back, showing the chamber from above, the jewels, the ledger, the two figures poised in silent conflict, and the faint glow of candlelight stretching across the polished floors like shadows of ambition. Camilla's cryptic words linger in the air, hinting at secrets within the vault yet unseen. Alistair knows that the confrontation has only begun, and that the next revelations will challenge not only loyalty and law, but the fragile moral compass of everyone in the palace. The next chapter promises a deeper unraveling, where ambition, fear, and heritage collide with consequences beyond any immediate understanding. The tension in Camilla's private chambers had thickened, settling like dust over polished floors. Captain Alistair remained poised, ledger in hand, each entry a key to understanding the breach of trust. Camilla, seated elegantly yet taut with hidden unease, allowed a quiet smile to brush her lips, controlled, calculated, but fleeting. The room was alive with unspoken conflict. Light and shadow danced over carved furniture and jewel-strewn tables, echoing the duality of loyalty and ambition playing out in human form. Alistair leaned closer, voice deliberate and measured. Some of these jewels were pledged, Camilla. Not stolen, pledged. And yet, the records conceal that truth. Why? The ledger between them seemed almost to pulse with the answer, each coded line a whisper of conspiracy. Camilla's eyes flickered briefly, the faintest trace of acknowledgement passing across her carefully composed face. She tilted her head, fingers brushing a ruby brooch as though drawing courage from it. Settling debts, Captain. Debts that predate even the current crown, she said softly. Some promises cannot be broken, no matter who witnesses them. The camera drifts slowly around the room, capturing subtle details. A ledger page turned too quickly, a hand trembling faintly, a candle flickering in uneven light. Each visual element underscores the tension, the unspoken moral conflict, the collision of tradition, inheritance, and conscience. Alistair's mind races. The pledged jewels, previously assumed stolen, now reveal a network of secret agreements, obligations, and hidden alliances. Some entries stretch back decades, linking multiple palace factions in a web of duty, fear, and ambition. Camilla's voice softens, almost regretful. You think I acted from greed alone, but history has its own demands. Some debts cannot wait for permission. Some promises are older than law. I preserved what I believed the crown would forget. Her admission hangs in the air, carrying moral weight that presses upon Alistair and the assembled aides. The camera lingers on her face, pride and fear, defiance and vulnerability intertwined. The jewels on the table glint like silent witnesses, their brilliance reflecting centuries of ceremonial power now entangled in human compromise. Alistair's response is steady but charged with moral authority. Promises made in secrecy, unrecorded and unverified, undermine trust. Intent may have been noble, or so you claim, but concealment is still betrayal. Loyalty is measured by transparency, not convenience. His eyes scan the room, noting the subtle shifts in Aid's posture, the faint tightening of jaws, the way shadows lengthen and recede across walls and polished floors. Every gesture amplifies the moral gravity, every glance hints at complicity, every pause reinforces tension. A moment of revelation emerges as Alistair opens a ledger page showing a coded pledge, a subset of rubies assigned to a foreign debt, quietly documented yet obscured in official records. The camera zooms in on the cryptic annotations, faint smudges betraying hurried secrecy. Alistair's breath catches. Theft is no longer a simple matter of ambition or temptation. It is part of a decades-long series of commitments, some binding, some morally ambiguous, all hidden beneath layers of ceremony and bureaucracy. Camilla leans back slightly, eyes narrowing. You understand now, she murmurs, that crown itself has obligations older than any command, older than protocol. I acted to preserve continuity, even if you cannot see the necessity. The tension tightens, almost visible in the space between them. The camera cuts to Alistair's hand hovering over the ledger, gloved fingers poised but not touching, an embodiment of restraint, judgment, and ethical deliberation. Alistair exhales slowly, the weight of responsibility pressing on him. Do I uphold law at the cost of legacy, or consider history's debts at the cost of protocol? His next words bridge authority and conscience. Intent may be noble, Camilla, but the law of the palace is clear. Secrecy, deception, and unrecorded pledges jeopardize the integrity of every servant, every guard, every ritual we uphold. The crown's trust is not yours to define unilaterally. The moral and emotional midpoint is reached when Camilla's eyes glisten faintly, revealing vulnerability beneath her carefully constructed poise. And yet, Captain, she whispers, voice trembling almost imperceptibly, some truths must be shielded. Some promises cannot be broken without consequences far graver than mere protocol. The room grows heavier, the moral stakes crystallizing. Loyalty, duty, and human ambition now collide with the weight of centuries, old expectations. Alistair steps back slightly, surveying the chamber and the subtle signs of internal conflict. A ledger page slightly askew, a jewel out of place. Aids frozen mid-motion. The camera moves across the room slowly, capturing micro expressions, fleeting glances, and the interplay of candlelight and shadow, emphasizing the cinematic tension. Every element underscores the fragile moral terrain, authority, heritage, and ambition entangled in human decisions that ripple far beyond the present moment. Then, a subtle yet critical clue emerges, a coded annotation in the ledger, partially overlooked in earlier reviews. It hints at a third party, an intermediary with influence inside and outside the palace, connected to the pledged jewels and the secrecy surrounding them. Alistair's brow tightens as he realizes the stakes are larger than Camilla's actions alone. A network of hidden allegiances has begun to surface, threatening the palace's balance and potentially implicating those long trusted. Camilla's lips tighten, the faintest flicker of fear crossing her otherwise calm visage. I warned you, Captain, she says quietly, almost a whisper. There are truths deeper than you imagine. Some reside in the vaults themselves, hidden from sight, waiting for the right moment. The camera lingers on her face, capturing the tension, the subtle interplay of power, fear, and moral complexity. Her warning is not just cryptic, it is a prelude to revelations that will challenge Alistair's understanding of loyalty, justice, and the very meaning of authority within the palace. The climax of Part 2 unfolds as Alistair reviews the ledger, the correspondence, and the newly discovered code. Patterns emerge, linking pledged jewels to undisclosed debts, secret intermediaries, and internal coordination. The moral dilemma intensifies. Enforcement of law may punish those who acted with noble intent, yet ignoring the breach may allow secrecy and ambition to erode centuries of trust. Every decision weighs like gold upon his conscience, every glance at Camilla a reminder of the human complexity behind protocol. The camera shifts to a wide-angle view of the chamber. Ledger open, jewels arranged meticulously yet touched by secrecy. Alistair standing resolute, Camilla seated poised yet unsettled, and aides frozen in silent contemplation. The palace itself seems to hold its breath, the stone walls absorbing the tension, the shadows stretching like fingers across floors polished by tradition and duty. Finally, Alistair speaks, voice low, firm and measured. This is not the end, Camilla. There are more questions to answer and more truths to uncover. Some of these will challenge loyalty, some will test conscience, and some will rewrite the story of the crown itself. The camera focuses on the ledger, now fully visible, as if it contains the moral heartbeat of the entire palace. Camilla's warning lingers in the air, hinting at secrets even deeper than the pledged jewels. Alistair senses that what lies ahead will not only expose human ambition, but reveal systemic betrayal within the palace itself. The investigation is no longer about theft alone. It is about uncovering layers of loyalty, corruption, and hidden history waiting to surface. The palace corridors felt different now. Shadows seemed heavier, corners darker, and the usual rhythm of footfalls echoed with unease. Captain Alistair moved silently along the familiar marble halls, each step measured, each breath controlled. The confrontation with Camilla had altered the atmosphere. Loyalty and trust were no longer assumed, only questioned. The camera pans across intricate stone carvings and gilded railings, each detail a witness to centuries of duty, now tainted by secrecy and betrayal. Alistair paused near a side entrance, the faint rustle of servants in distant wings audible but subdued. He knew that the palace itself had become an instrument of revelation, walls, ledgers and objects acting as silent custodians of hidden agendas. The moral landscape was no longer binary. Loyalty, duty, and law had merged with ambition, fear, and secrecy. Every guard, aide, and administrator now carried the weight of complicity, whether acknowledged or not. In the inner vault chamber, the stolen and partially pledged jewels rested in their velvet-lined boxes, catalogued meticulously. Yet the ledger hinted at further concealment. Forged signatures, altered entries, and subtle erasures that suggested collusion extending beyond Camilla's private quarters. Alistair reviewed the documents again, tracing faint pencil marks, margin notes, and cryptic symbols. The camera captures the close-up, smudged ink, a folded corner, a faint watermark, all indicators of hidden manipulation. A junior aide, pale and hesitant, stepped forward. "Captain, there's more correspondence," he whispered, holding a bundle of notes bound with a thin silk ribbon. Some were hidden in the Queen's archives, some in private storage spaces. Alistair's eyes narrowed. The discovery reinforced a growing suspicion. The palace itself had been compromised, not by a single act of ambition, but by a network of deliberate concealment. The tension tightened, the room contracting as if every object absorbed the unease. Alistair's voice was low, steady, and precise. Every note, every ledger entry, every record. Everything must be examined. We are not dealing with a simple breach. We are dealing with systemic deception. The camera pans slowly over his face, capturing subtle micro-expressions, eyes narrowing, lips pressed firmly, fingers tapping a rhythm on the ledger. The weight of centuries of protocol and moral duty pressed upon him, unrelenting. The camera shifts to Camilla, who observes the proceedings from a distance, poised yet guarded. Her expression is unreadable, a mask of confidence hiding uncertainty. She has long relied on hierarchy, ceremony, and subtle manipulation to navigate the palace's inner workings, but even she recognizes that the ledger and the correspondence threaten to unravel carefully constructed narratives. The moral complexity of her position becomes apparent. Ambition, obligation, and protective instinct collide within her, creating a nuanced tension that defies simple judgment. As the investigation deepens, Alistair uncovers further irregularities, forged signatures on inspection logs, ledger entries erased and rewritten, and correspondence previously dismissed as trivial. Each discovery carries emotional weight, a reminder that betrayal is rarely loud or dramatic. It thrives in the quiet, in the deliberate concealment of minor details. The camera lingers on Alistair's hands as he carefully turns a fragile ledger page, the faint rustle of paper a counterpoint to the moral storm building within the palace. A mid-morning revelation intensifies the atmosphere. A previously unnoticed journal page from the late Queen's personal vault emerges. Its contents are subtle but profound. An amendment to her will that hints at conditional inheritance, protections for certain jewels, and undisclosed privileges that may shift the stakes of the ongoing investigation. Alistair leans close, gloved fingers tracing delicate ink strokes, the weight of history pressing heavily. The camera captures the detail, the faded script, the pressure of the quill, the sense that this small document could redefine loyalty, legality, and the moral order of the palace. The aides shift nervously as the implications sink in. Some had witnessed the pledge jewels, others the ledger's cryptic symbols. And now the journal page threatens to redraw the boundaries of responsibility. The moral tension is palpable. Discretion, concealment, and ambition have entangled themselves so tightly with the Crown's protocols that exposing the truth risks fracturing relationships, undermining centuries of hierarchy, and perhaps provoking scandal that reaches beyond the palace walls. Alistair's voice breaks the silence, firm but contemplative. We are now navigating the grey space between protocol and truth. What we uncover may disturb the balance, but ignoring it would betray every principle we are sworn to uphold. The camera lingers on the ledger, the journal, and the jewels, each object acting as a silent witness to human ambition, secrecy, and the fragile morality of duty. A private dialogue between Alistair and a senior aide offers a glimpse of the emotional toll. Captain, sometimes I fear that revealing everything will do more harm than good. The aide admits quietly. Alistair pauses, considering the words. Perhaps, he responds, voice measured, but truth has its own weight. Concealment may feel safe, but it erodes trust faster than ambition ever could. The camera shifts to a close-up of both faces. Worry etched in subtle lines, moral clarity in the captain's eyes, doubt reflected in the aides. The afternoon brings further tension. Alistair Cross references the journal page with ledger entries, noticing patterns of concealment previously overlooked. Certain aides had accessed private chambers under the guise of inspection. Some signatures are faintly altered, suggesting either complicity or coerced participation. The palace, for all its grandeur, now appears fragile, a monument of human ambition and institutional oversight. Teetering on the edge of revelation, Camilla's presence, though physically absent from the vault, hangs over the proceedings like a shadow. Subtle traces of her influence, displaced objects, adjusted ledgers, encrypted notes, serve as reminders that ambition and secrecy can extend far beyond immediate observation. The moral stakes intensify. Every choice made in the shadows affects the integrity of the crown, the trust of the royal guard, and the ethical compass of those sworn to serve. The day wanes, yet the investigation shows no signs of resolution. Alistair, weary but resolute, gathers the aides for reflection. His voice, quiet yet commanding, resonates in the vaulted chamber. Every discrepancy, every note, every ledger entry tells a story. We are not here merely to document. We are here to discern intent, to uncover hidden allegiances, and to ensure that those who serve the crown remain worthy of its trust. The camera drifts slowly, capturing the tension etched in every face, the faint glimmer of jewels in subdued candlelight, the fragile moral equilibrium that now defines the palace. As the evening approaches, a subtle clue emerges, a forged signature linked to a high-ranking aide, coupled with correspondence pointing to covert collaboration with Camilla. The realization hits with quiet force. The palace's moral fabric is frayed, not from a single act of ambition, but from a carefully constructed network of concealment and deferred accountability. The camera lingers on Alistair's hand, hovering over the ledger, the tension of decision and judgment palpable. The closing moments of Part 1 are introspective, emphasizing psychological and moral tension. Alistair stands alone in the vault chamber, eyes scanning the ledger and journal, fingers lightly brushing the velvet-covered jewels. Shadows stretch across polished floors, echoing the ambiguity of human loyalty and ambition. The palace seems alive, its silence thick with the weight of secrets, waiting for revelation, judgment, and reconciliation. The ledger, the journal, and the subtle traces of internal collusion reveal a palace where loyalty, ambition, and secrecy intertwine. Alistair senses that the next revelations will not only expose betrayal, but challenge the very notion of duty, hierarchy, and ethical service. What lies ahead will test every conviction, every oath, and every moral choice of those sworn to protect the crown. Night had descended over the palace, yet its corridors were far from silent. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching across marble floors, stretching long and thin like the moral ambiguity now gripping the household. Captain Alistair walked with careful steps, each echo carrying the weight of suspicion and responsibility. The confrontation with Camilla had left no room for complacency. Every aide, every guard, every document was now a potential vessel of betrayal. The camera drifts slowly down the hall, capturing intricate carvings and gilded sconces, their cold light reflecting centuries of duty now shadowed by human ambition. Inside the inner vault chamber, Alistair reviewed the evidence with renewed focus. Ledger pages lay open on the table, alongside the journal page recovered from the late Queen's private vault. Candles flickered, casting shifting patterns over the jewels and papers, illuminating their details while leaving corners obscured, an apt metaphor for the investigation itself. Each ledger entry, each faded signature, and each coded correspondence now hinted at not isolated ambition, but a network of secrecy woven through the palace hierarchy. The first discovery of the evening sent a subtle shock through the room, a forged signature on an inspection log linked to one of the most trusted aides. The camera pans to Alistair's gloved hand tracing the ink, eyes narrowing with calculation. This was deliberate, he murmured almost to himself. The ledger, once a tool of record keeping, had become a map of deceit, revealing who had acted in the shadows and how deeply the collusion ran. The aides present exchanged nervous glances. The weight of complicity hung in the air like a physical presence. Aides were summoned one by one, their statements precise yet revealing. Each hesitation, each subtle avoidance of the captain's gaze, became a narrative of guilt, fear, or concealed knowledge. Alistair's voice was calm, measured, but carried an unflinching moral authority. Every action has consequences. Every omission, every falsified record, every hidden correspondence undermines not only the crown, but the trust upon which this palace has stood for centuries. The camera lingers on a trembling hand holding a ledger page, the subtle quiver betraying the internal conflict between fear and loyalty. The investigation began to uncover patterns, minor breaches, seemingly trivial, now revealed as deliberate manipulation. Certain jewels had been moved without authorization, some ledger entries were misdated, and correspondence suggested coordination between Camilla and previously unidentified intermediaries. Alistair recognized the moral complexity. Human ambition had layered itself beneath centuries of protocol, and disentangling it would require both precision and courage. A particularly tense moment arises when Alistair discovers a set of encrypted notes hidden within a ledger page. Each note refers to obligations and favors, some extending decades into the past. The camera closes in on the faded ink, capturing every careful loop and symbol. Alistair's inner voice underscores the tension. Trust is fragile. Secrets once sown grow roots that are hard to uproot. The notes suggest that the pledged jewels were only one piece of a broader network of hidden agreements, alliances forged and maintained in silence, binding individuals across generations to unspoken obligations. Camilla's motivations, previously ambiguous, begin to reveal their nuance. In private correspondence, she justifies her actions with a mix of fear, loyalty, and ambition. She acted not purely for personal gain, but to honor promises, protect family legacies, and preserve what she perceived as the rightful order of the palace. The camera lingers on her writing, the delicate folds of her hands, the intensity of focus in her eyes, her vulnerability masked by calculated poise. The narrative emphasizes that ambition is rarely monolithic. It carries complexity, morality, and subtlety. Alistair pauses to consider the moral consequences. Loyalty, duty, and law are intertwined, yet occasionally they conflict. The ledger, journal, and notes reveal a web where actions that appear treacherous are sometimes born of devotion, and decisions that seem righteous may conceal ulterior motives. The palace, grand and imposing, becomes a living reflection of this moral grey zone, its halls echoing with unspoken tension, whispers of secrecy, and the shadow of ambition. The captain's reflection is interrupted by a subtle clue. An old correspondence between Camilla and a former archivist long thought retired, suggesting that the pledged jewels were linked to external debts and hidden alliances. Alistair's eyes narrow as he considers the implications. The camera captures his hand hovering over the note, fingers poised yet restrained, a visual representation of the careful balance between judgment and evidence. This revelation confirms that the conspiracy extends beyond immediate quarters, implicating multiple layers of palace staff and trusted aides. Night deepens, and the emotional tension intensifies. Alistair gathers his aides in the vault chamber, speaking quietly, but with unmistakable authority. The palace is not simply a building of stone and marble. It is a repository of trust, history, and human ambition. Each ledger entry, each note, each pledge is a test of conscience. We must uncover all, even if the truth unsettles the hierarchy, fractures loyalties, and challenges everything we thought we knew. The camera pans slowly across the aides' faces, capturing subtle expressions of fear, resolve, and moral conflict. A critical discovery arrives in the form of a hidden ledger page from the late Queen's personal vault. Its contents reveal a conditional clause in her will regarding inheritance, privileges, and the jewels themselves. This subtle legal directive threatens to reshape the ongoing investigation, reframing past actions in light of historical intent. Alistair studies the page closely, gloved fingers tracing delicate ink strokes. The camera emphasizes the fragility of document, a symbolic reflection of the delicate moral and political balance within the palace. The aides shift uneasily, sensing that their loyalty, ambition, and discretion are all under scrutiny. Some had witnessed movements of the pledged jewels. Some had participated in the concealment of ledger entries. All now recognize that the investigation threatens to expose hidden agendas. The tension is psychological as much as procedural. Human ambition, secrecy, and protective instinct now collide with ethical obligation and ceremonial hierarchy. Alistair's voice breaks the silence. What we uncover here will not merely document past actions. It will define the moral landscape of this palace. Our duty is not only to report, but to discern intent, navigate ambiguity, and protect the crown from betrayal, from both overt and subtle forms of misconduct. The camera drifts across the vault chamber, capturing the interplay of shadow and light on jewels, ledgers, and faces, emphasizing the psychological weight of the moment. As midnight approaches, Alistair isolates a subtle pattern. Forged signatures, misstated entries, and encrypted notes converge around Camilla's immediate sphere of influence. The network of ambition and concealment becomes tangible, revealing a palace structured not only by law and hierarchy, but also by human fear, desire, and the compulsion to protect private interests. The camera focuses on Alistair's contemplative expression, fingers hovering over the ledger, a man balancing evidence, ethics, and historical duty. The final moments of Part 2 are introspective, emphasizing the psychological toll and moral uncertainty. Alistair stands alone in the vault chamber, surrounded by jewels, ledgers, and journal pages. Shadows stretching across the polished floors like the reach of secrecy itself. He recognizes that exposing the conspiracy may fracture loyalties, destabilize the palace, and challenge centuries of ceremonial hierarchy. But concealment carries an equally grave consequence. As the ledger, journal, and hidden correspondences reveal the breadth of deception, Alistair knows the path ahead will demand action, judgment, and courage. The palace is no longer merely a home of tradition. It is a crucible, testing every oath, every loyalty, and every moral choice. What awaits is the confrontation where justice, accountability, and the sanctity of duty must finally assert themselves. The palace corridors were quieter now, yet the air felt charged with the remnants of tension. Shadows lingered along the gilded walls, curling across marble floors polished by centuries of protocol. Captain Alistair walked steadily, his boots echoing softly but deliberately. The confrontation with Camilla, the unearthing of ledgers, journal pages, and secret correspondence, all had brought the palace to a delicate precipice. Tonight, justice would be measured, protocol enforced, but the emotional weight of human ambition and loyalty would not be easily reconciled. The inner chamber, usually a place of ceremonial calm, now held a palpable gravity. Alistair entered first, the camera following his measured steps across the floor. The jewels, once displaced and pledged, now rested secured in their velvet-lined cases, gleaming under soft candlelight. The ledger lay open on the central table, a silent testament to both betrayal and the painstaking work of uncovering truth. Every page, every annotation, every smudge of ink now held the weight of accountability. Camilla awaited, seated with poised elegance, yet her composure betrayed subtle unease. The soft rustle of her gown accompanied her measured breathing, an almost imperceptible counterpoint to the solemnity of the moment. She had been warned, confronted, and subtly tested, but now the palace itself demanded resolution. Alistair's eyes scanned the room carefully, noting every detail, the faint tilt of a ledger page, the glimmer of jewels catching candlelight, the aide's restrained gestures of anticipation. "Camilla," Alistair began, voice calm but resolute, "the investigation is complete. The discrepancies, the pledged jewels, the ledger entries, and the correspondence have all been accounted for. Every action, every omission, and every concealment has been reviewed with the full weight of protocol and duty." The words carried finality, yet they were tempered with measured dignity. The palace walls seemed to absorb the gravity of his voice, echoing it softly across the chamber. Camilla's gaze remained steady, though her fingers lightly touched the edge of the ledger as if drawing strength. "And the consequences?" she asked, voice quiet, yet tinged with a vulnerability previously hidden beneath her poise. The camera lingers on her expression, pride shadowed by fear, confidence tempered by anticipation, a nuanced mixture of human complexity. Alistair steps closer, careful not to appear confrontational but firm in authority. "Consequences are measured by law, by loyalty, and by the ethical duty we owe to the crown. Some actions required restitution, some required acknowledgement of failure, all required transparency." His eyes meet hers steadily, emphasizing moral clarity over personal judgment. The tension in the chamber is heavy, yet controlled, like the calm before a storm finally breaks in orderly fashion. Aides assist in formally documenting the findings. Each signature, each annotation, and each verified ledger entry now carries a weight previously absent. The camera follows gloved fingers as they trace lines on paper, ensuring accuracy and capturing the ceremonial rhythm of accountability. This meticulous procedure transforms abstract morality into concrete justice, demonstrating that even in moments of human ambition, order and protocol can prevail. Camilla rises slowly, the rustle of her gown filling the silence. She glances at the jewels, now secured and returned to proper places. "I understand," she says softly, voice carrying a trace of solemn reflection. "I accept responsibility for my actions and the burden they placed upon others. Perhaps I misjudged the balance between duty and personal judgment. Her words are careful, acknowledging both her accountability and the complexity of her intentions. Alistair nods, maintaining his composed presence. Acknowledgement is the first step toward restoration. The jewels are returned, the ledger reconciled, and the correspondence sealed. Yet the lessons remain. Loyalty must be transparent, ambition must respect protocol, and the moral weight of service extends beyond personal desire. The camera slowly pans across the room, capturing every detail: the restored order, the subdued lighting, the reflective expressions on aides' faces. A quiet ceremony follows. The ledger is returned to its archival place, securely bound and documented. The jewels are placed back in their official cases, each movement deliberate and precise. Alistair supervises, ensuring that the process honors both historical significance and ceremonial procedure. The camera emphasizes tactile details: velvet lining pressed, clasps secured, ink sealed, symbols of duty fulfilled and trust restored. A moment of personal reflection follows as Alistair steps back to observe the room. The tension remains faint but softened. The moral arc has shifted. Betrayal has been addressed, ambition tempered by accountability, and the palace's integrity preserved. Shadows still linger, but the light of justice now illuminates the contours of duty, sacrifice, and measured authority. Camilla steps forward, a subtle gesture of reconciliation. "I have learned," she admits quietly, "that power carries responsibility beyond immediate understanding, and that ambition must never eclipse the greater duty, history to the crown, and to those who serve faithfully." The camera captures the subtle emotional release in her eyes, the small easing of posture, the faint hint of humility mingling with her usual composure. Alistair responds, voice calm, almost reflective, "And we have learned together that transparency, accountability, and ethical service are the pillars upon which the crown stands. Mistakes are rectified not merely by procedure, but by recognition, restitution, and commitment to uphold the trust placed upon us." The camera drifts slowly across the room, capturing the restored balance, the jewels gleaming under candlelight, the ledger secured, and the aides quietly acknowledging the completion of their duty. The evening deepens into a serene calm, the palace no longer tense but contemplative. The camera lingers on the vault doors, now closed softly, sealing both the physical and moral resolution. Alistair and Camilla exchange a final, measured look, a silent acknowledgement of lessons learned, responsibilities assumed, and duties fulfilled. The palace breathes with quiet order once more, yet the moral weight of the past events remains etched in the minds of those who served. The palace stands restored, yet its history has been subtly altered by ambition, secrecy, and moral reckoning. Alistair contemplates the quiet victories and lingering scars, aware that even when justice is served, lessons of loyalty, duty, and human complexity remain enduring. The next chapter will reflect on legacy, memory, and the silent weight carried by those sworn to protect the crown. The palace had entered a rare, quiet twilight, where every corridor, every chamber seemed to breathe with the soft rhythm of order restored. Captain Alistair moved with deliberate calm, aware that the confrontation with Camilla, the ledger's revelations, and the pledged jewels' reconciliation had left invisible traces across the household. The camera follows him along polished marble, light from high windows cascading across gilded balustrades, capturing the subtle serenity that only follows the resolution of a profound conflict. The inner chamber, now emptied of aides and ledgers, held only the jewels and the late Queen's journal, carefully returned to their archival places. Alistair paused before them, hands clasped behind his back. Each object, the rubies, diamonds, and sapphires, the meticulously annotated ledger, the fragile journal page, was more than a symbol of wealth. They were witnesses to human frailty, ambition, and the enduring weight of duty. The camera lingers on the reflective Surfaces of the jewels, each facet catching candlelight like a quiet reminder of trust restored. Camilla entered quietly, her footsteps measured, her usual poise softened by the events she had endured. She approached the central table, glancing at the secured ledger and the velvet-lined jewels. Camera captures her expression, pride tempered by humility, defiance tempered by reflection. She speaks softly, voice carrying both acknowledgement and regret. I see now that my choices, though intended to preserve history, have caused unnecessary discord. The Crown's trust cannot be negotiated or bent. It is not mine to define. Alistair remains composed, his posture steady, yet his eyes reflect an understanding of the nuance in her words. Acknowledgement is essential, Camilla. Justice is not merely enforcement. It is recognition of missteps, restitution, and commitment to uphold the greater order. The camera pans slowly, capturing their interaction against the backdrop of the restored chamber, the jewels gleaming silently in their rightful places. The aides re-enter, quietly arranging the final archival documents, closing ledger covers, and ensuring that every record reflects accurate accountability. Alistair oversees each motion, each gesture deliberate, ceremonial, and precise. The camera captures tactile details, velvet pressed, clasps secured, parchment stacked, ink seals verified. These motions are not mere formalities. They are the physical embodiment of restored trust and moral responsibility. A moment of reflection follows, intimate yet profound. Alistair speaks, voice low, resonant. The Crown is more than jewels and ledgers. It is the continuity of duty, the trust of those who serve faithfully, and the integrity of the institution across generations. We have restored order, but the lessons of ambition, secrecy, and human complexity will remain in our memory. The camera shifts to a wide view of the chamber, highlighting the juxtaposition of restored objects, human figures, and the subtle play of light and shadow. Camilla approaches the central table, laying her gloved hand lightly on the ledger. I have learned, she admits, that authority carried responsibility beyond personal understanding. Ambition unchecked can erode loyalty. Power is only meaningful when tempered by accountability and respect for those who serve alongside us. Her words carry quiet weight, a nuanced acknowledgement of human imperfection and the gravity of moral choice. Alistair nods slightly, recognizing both her acknowledgement and the subtle emotional release in her posture. And we, he says softly, have learned that the path of service required constant vigilance, humility, and ethical clarity. Even when order is restored, we remain guardians, not only of treasures but of truth, loyalty, and legacy. The camera lingers on their faces, capturing a fleeting but profound human connection. Understanding tempered by duty, reconciliation tempered by history. The palace now seemed to exhale, the tension of recent days dissolving into contemplative calm. Alistair steps toward the vaulted windows. Gazing at the courtyard below, where moonlight casts gentle reflections over the stone pathways, the camera drifts slowly, capturing the symmetry of the palace, the glint of lamp posts, and the faint movement of a lone guard patrolling, a silent acknowledgement that vigilance endures even in restored order. In quiet ceremony, Alistair ensures the final archival process. Ledger entries are logged, journal pages sealed, and the pledged jewels formally returned to their protected cases. Every gesture carries significance, the archival seals, the careful placement of each gemstone, the ceremonial notation of completion. The camera focuses on minute details, a quill tracing the final signature, the soft click of a lock, the gentle brush of velvet against stone. These are acts that embody respect, order, and moral closure. Alistair steps back, surveying the chamber one last time. The jewels, once a source of temptation and secrecy, now represent continuity, memory, and the moral weight of the crown. Camilla, standing a respectful distance away, acknowledges this restoration without words. The camera lingers on her reflective expression, pride softened by humility, ambition reconciled With accountability, the palace itself seems to hold its breath, acknowledging that the equilibrium of duty has been restored, though scars remain. A brief, intimate dialogue occurs, almost a whisper. "Camilla, do you believe history will forgive me?" "Alistair, history will remember the lessons, not just the mistakes. What matters is that integrity and duty prevail. That is what endures." The camera pans outward, capturing the vaulted ceilings, the polished floors, the jewels resting in solemn splendor. Silence fills the chamber, yet it is not emptiness. It is the quiet resonance of moral order, of reconciliation, and of duty fulfilled. Shadows retreat, candlelight stabilizes, and the palace stands restored, dignified, and reverent. The final moments focus on Alistair alone, standing before the closed vault doors. His hand rests briefly on the cold metal, a gesture of silent acknowledgement. The camera captures the subtle interplay of light and shadow across his contemplative expression. His voice, low and reflective, concludes, "Justice has been served, but the weight of responsibility is enduring. Those who guard history, loyalty, and truth must carry these lessons forward, quietly, steadfastly, and with unwavering vigilance." The palace sleeps under a watchful moon, jewels restored, ledgers secured, and secrets reconciled, yet the memory of ambition, human complexity, and moral choice lingers. The final chapter reflects on legacy, the enduring weight of duty, and the silent victories of those who protect the crown. A contemplation of history, loyalty, and the ethical vigilance required to preserve both. The palace rested in an uncommon silence. Marble corridors, once echoing with footsteps of suspicion, confrontation, and moral deliberation, now absorbed the stillness of twilight. Captain Alistair walked slowly, hands clasped behind his back, eyes tracing the gilded railings, ornate arches, and polished floors. The soft glow of lanterns cast elongated shadows, not of menace, but of calm reflection. It was a night of reckoning completed, a chapter closed, yet the weight of lessons learned pressed gently upon every stone and artifact within the palace walls. He paused before the main vault. The doors, now locked and sealed, stood as both barrier and testament, symbols of protection, continuity, and moral duty. The jewels, once the locus of temptation, ambition, and secrecy, rested in their velvet-lined cases, gleaming softly under the lantern's golden glow. Alistair's gaze lingered on them, not with desire, but with understanding. These treasures, beyond their material value, carried the imprint of centuries, a history of loyalty, devotion, and the human complexity of those sworn to safeguard the crown. The camera drifts slowly over the vault's polished surfaces, capturing the subtle reflections of jewels, walls, and ceiling, emphasizing continuity and the enduring nature of duty. The soft sound of wind through high windows fills the room, mingling with the faint rustle of archived pages, a quiet chorus of history observed, protected, and preserved. Alistair's contemplative expression mirrors the palace's solemnity. Vigilance is eternal, and lessons learned must be carried forward. He moves toward a ledger resting on a side table, its pages finely reconciled and sealed. His fingers brush the cover lightly, as though acknowledging both the human errors recorded within and the ethical triumphs that restored order. The camera captures minute details, the gentle crease of paper, the soft glint of a sealed emblem, and the shadows of the vault stretching like quiet guardians. Every object serves as a reminder that legacy is not defined by grandeur alone, but by the fidelity of those entrusted with its care. Alistair turns to observe the palace beyond the vault chamber. The courtyard lies still beneath the moonlight, paths tracing geometric precision. Across gardens now bathed in silver, the camera follows his gaze, revealing the symmetry, the architectural elegance, and the weight of centuries of ceremonial practice. He reflects quietly, voice low, yet imbued with measured resonance. History is not only written by kings and queens, but by those who serve silently, who observe, protect, and reconcile the ambitions of the human heart with the duty of the institution. In the quiet of the evening, Alastair considers the human cost of loyalty. Camilla's actions, once fraught with secrecy, have been reconciled through acknowledgement and restitution. The ledger, the journal, the pledged jewels, all have found their rightful place, yet their history serves as a silent reminder. Ambition, secrecy, and moral complexity are inseparable from legacy. The palace, grand and enduring, becomes both witness and custodian of these truths. He walks slowly through the corridors, past tapestries depicting ancestors of the crown, their faces solemn yet dignified. Camera captures each tapestry, each carved frame, emphasizing continuity, memory, and heritage. Every act of service, every choice of conscience, every moment of ethical vigilance contributes to the legacy we leave. Alastair reflects, not only of crowns and crown's treasures, but of human responsibility, trust, and moral clarity. Alastair pauses in a small antechamber, the air carrying a faint scent of parchment and polished wood. He reflects on the lessons of the past weeks, loyalty tempered by moral discernment, ambition moderated by accountability, and the enduring vigilance required to preserve both order and ethical integrity. The camera shifts slowly, capturing light spilling across the marble floor, a visual metaphor for illumination after darkness, reflection after tension. A moment of personal introspection follows. He closes his eyes briefly, considering the silent victories of those who serve, guards who acted with restraint and honor, aides who chose truth over concealment, and even Camilla, who ultimately acknowledged the weight of her choices. The camera frames his face in soft focus, capturing subtle micro-expressions, resolve tempered with humility, comprehension tempered with empathy. Every gesture, every glance, resonates with the quiet dignity of moral service. The palace itself seems to respond, the stillness amplifying both the serenity and the gravity of reflection. Alastair moves toward a window overlooking the gardens. Moonlight glints off sculpted fountains, casting delicate patterns of light and shadow across pathways meticulously maintained for centuries. The camera pans slowly, capturing symmetry, reflection, and a sense of enduring order. Here, Alastair considers the continuity of history, that each act, whether visible or hidden, contributes to a legacy that stretches far beyond the present moment. Finally, he pauses before the closed vault once more. His gloved hand rests briefly on the cold metal, a silent acknowledgement of responsibility fulfilled and vigilance sustained. The jewels, the ledger, the journal, all are symbols not only of history and heritage, but of human conscience, ethical courage, and moral responsibility. The camera slowly pulls back, framing Alastair against the vault doors, highlighting the interplay of light and shadow, reflection and permanence. The palace sleeps under the watchful moon, its treasures secure, its ledgers reconciled, and its history preserved. Yet the lessons of ambition, loyalty, and moral vigilance remain, quietly awaiting the next generation of guardians. In the final part, reflection deepens on memory, responsibility, and the enduring weight of legacy carried silently by those sworn to protect the crown. The palace rested under the soft light of dawn, a gentle glow washing over marble corridors and gilded arches. Captain Alastair moved quietly through the halls, the echoes of the past weeks still lingering in every polished surface, every carved relief. The confrontations, revelations, and reconciliations had left traces, not of chaos but of hard-earned wisdom. The palace itself seemed to breathe with quiet acknowledgement, a living archive of history, human ambition, and moral responsibility. He paused before the vault doors, now permanently closed, secure, and silently formidable. The jewels, once a source of temptation, now represented memory, continuity, and the ethical vigilance required to preserve them. The camera slowly tracks over their surfaces, light glinting off facets, shadows tracing the contours, a visual metaphor for the interplay of history, duty, and conscience. Each gem, each document, each sealed ledger page carries the imprint of countless decisions, human and moral alike. Alastair reflects on the lessons of service, duty, and vigilance. Every act of loyalty, every moment of restraint, and every choice guided by conscience becomes part of the palace's living memory. Guardianship, he whispers almost to himself, is not a single act. It is a lifetime of measured judgment, quiet vigilance, and unwavering dedication. The camera lingers on his contemplative profile, light falling softly across his features, emphasizing the solemn dignity of responsibility. Camilla approaches quietly, standing at a respectful distance. The tension that once defined their interactions has dissolved into understanding, tempered by experience and reflection. The crown, the palace, it asks more than we sometimes comprehend. She admits, voice gentle yet deliberate. Power is only meaningful when paired with accountability and ambition. Only safe when tempered by conscience. The camera focuses on her eyes, capturing the vulnerability beneath her poise, a quiet acknowledgement of her journey and growth. Alastair nods subtly, and yet he responds. It is the silent guardians who preserve that balance. Not the ambitious alone, not the powerful alone, but those who serve with vigilance, integrity, and humility. The palace's continuity depends upon them, and the lessons they carry forward. The camera pans slowly across the chamber, lingering on ledgers, journals, and jewels, objects now transformed into symbols of ethical stewardship. He moves through the corridors once more, past tapestries, portraits, and statues chronicling centuries of kings, queens, and those who served them. Faithfully, each artifact tells a story of human endeavor, ambition, and moral choice. Alastair's reflection continues, voice calm and resonant. History is not merely a record of rulers, but of those who guide, guard, and preserve it. Every ledger entry, every careful decision, every act of conscience contributes to the legacy we leave. The camera shifts to the gardens outside, bathed in the soft glow of morning light. Fountains shimmer, pathways glisten with dew, and sculpted hedges maintain their centuries. Old symmetry. Alastair's gaze follows the geometry of the grounds, recognizing that beauty, order, and vigilance coexist in careful balance. The palace, its treasures, and the people sworn to its service form a continuum, a living testament to memory, loyalty, and the moral weight of duty. A subtle, intimate moment follows as Alastair reflects on the human aspect of legacy. The royal guard, steadfast and vigilant, embodies a continuity of moral responsibility. Camilla's acknowledgement, the meticulous restoration of ledgers, and the careful return of jewels illustrate that even amidst ambition, secrecy, and human complexity, ethical order can prevail. The camera captures Alastair's quiet contemplation, juxtaposed with soft glints from the jewels and fading candlelight, a meditation on history, responsibility, and the enduring consequences of human choice. Alastair pauses before the central chamber one last time. His hand rests briefly on the cool metal of the vault doors. The gesture is not possessive but reverent, a recognition that his service and that of others safeguards not just objects or protocols, but memory, integrity, and the moral arc of the palace itself. The camera slowly pulls back, framing the vault, the chamber, and Alastair in a tableau of solemnity and enduring duty. His voice, quiet yet resolute, concludes the reflection. The weight of legacy is not carried by the crown alone, nor by jewels, ledgers, or walls. It is carried in silence, in vigilance, and in the moral choices of those entrusted with history. Each decision shapes the continuum of memory, honor, and responsibility. The crown endures, because those who serve faithfully endure with it. The palace, serene and dignified under the morning light, stands as both a monument and a reminder. shadows retreat, and the treasures, sealed ledgers, and journals remain symbols of ethical stewardship, historical reverence, and human accountability. The camera lingers on the vault doors, slowly fading as the palace seems to exhale, its history preserved, its legacy secure, and its moral weight acknowledged by those sworn to protect it. The story closes on quiet reflection. Human ambition, loyalty, and moral vigilance have been reconciled. The jewels, the ledgers, and the palace itself remain symbols of memory, responsibility, and enduring legacy. The royal guard continues its silent watch, a reminder that the weight of duty carries forward, quietly sustaining history, order, and the crown's moral authority.